Hello.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening.
Hey.
Hey, Adam.
New York.
Hey, Eric. I think everybody is here. We probably can start. Okay, sorry. Pull everybody together. I want to make sure that the plan we present, the team feels comfortable with that. I don't want to speak for the team without acknowledging the team or get a approval or agreement from the team. So that's why I pulled everybody. But if you have other urgencies, please feel free to drop anytime. So here's the follow-up items I called out here after all the sync discussions yesterday. So first of all, the context of why initially we were asked to develop a plan for October. So that's we discovered the context here in the stand-up yesterday. So if you haven't read that, please read that really quickly. So that's the background why initially we were asked for a plan for October. And then talked to many people yesterday and looked through our recordings and notes. So today there will be a meeting in the afternoon that Christopher, Eric, Steve Lloyd will hold to discuss the need by date of sharding from a business perspective. But we do need to provide a sharding plan to give a rough idea how this project will go from now. So I drafted this plan. Hopefully everybody had read through it, had read through it with proposal. Just to highlight, the proposal basically asks for 3 more SREs and 2 more BEs to add to the team or to add to the project by in a week. I mean, as soon as possible, of course. We already have work to do. We know that there are work to do right now. So I'm giving it a week, but we'll see how fast we can assemble those team members if it gets approved. First of all, I would like to ask for your opinions. Does this plan make sense? Speaking from adding the people and the rough timeline estimate, because the timeline I'm projecting for, based on the information I'm projecting for the worst case scenario, like January, end of January, we would be able to deploy, make the first production deployment of our first iteration. Does that sound close to everybody's estimation, or is too bold, or is too conservative?
So I think the first thing is to thank you for taking the time to do this. I think we should talk about it a little bit. I think the first thing is, if the initial haste was based on this October timeline, right, then, and the October timeline is no longer valid, we have a different timeline now. Why do we still have to make this go at 3 times the pace as initially planned? That feels like, I'm not sure if that's even needed. So that's sort of my first question. The second thing is that I have quite a few concerns regarding sort of this adding more people and it will magically go faster. But I think it is probably going to be more productive to outline what we need done, especially for the SREs and when. And I think the pattern that was established by Craig in sort of, hey, we need a stable counterpart because we have questions, right? Can you help us with that? Is maybe a little bit like easier than just having 3 people from next week. And it's also like, I'm not sure if we can parallelize all of these things as neatly as we make it out here, right? But that is something for others to contribute to as well. So this feels very optimistic to me. It feels like we can just like add more people and reduce the timeline significantly. I do think some things can be parallelized. For example, we could stand up a Postgres cluster in production if that was a thing. I'm not sure, but we've just started working on this in earnest, really. So there are like many unknowns in it. And I think that is my concern, that if we give the impression that if we just add more, it'll linearly get faster, right? I'm not sure about that.
Let's go through each of your questions. The first one, why? Why? Because even now the tipping point is projected to be next March. Why do we still need to rush to accelerate? But I think the first bullet, that's the context of why we need. There is a kind of urgency, and I think that's what Eric explained. Major concern is probably due to some unknown, unexpected events, like if some competitor just EOL their product, we may see a 10x increase on our load. Then is our database ready to pick up that load? And also I know that simultaneously the infrastructure team is working on a proposal to prepare for the scenario of what if we see a 10x increase of the load. So I hope that answers that question, why the urgency to accelerate.
Yeah, so I think the first, like, to respond here, I'm actually not sure the report says we're going to tip over in 9 months. Like the way I interpret the language is it says like we have confidence that this will not happen in 9 months. And after this, it doesn't say like on March, we're going to like fall over. I think that's not the case, right? As far as I know, I think that's slightly different.
Yeah, Fabian, I understand your concern, but the information we received from the executive leaders, especially Eric, is let's accelerate this tipping point. It's good to see that we still have headroom based on regular praise or regular increase of the system, but let's accelerate. I think that's what Eric wanted.
Okay. Thanks. I think I understand that.
Yeah. Okay. The second question you had is, can you just repeat it briefly?
I think my question is, this to me reads like a proposal where the like asked for acceleration is primarily achieved by adding more people. And I think in some areas, that may not actually lead to the desired acceleration. And I think the other thing is that specifically for the SREs, I think this is also voiced by Marin, maybe rather than asking for dedicated folks by next week, which has, I think, a lot of opportunity costs, saying, hey, this is what we need done, right, by infrastructure. Can you help us get this done faster, right? It's going to be maybe more useful. But it still feels to me a little bit sort of optimistic in, like, I think the team is already doing this as fast as they can, right? And I think I'm wondering if this is going to accelerate it significantly. That's maybe also a question for Camille and Jorik and.
Yeah, I would add there, sort of added it in the doc, but I think if we add the proposed number of people, was a total of like 8 or something? Oh, sorry, 5. So 2 back and 3 SREs. I think first of all, those SREs we're probably not going to need for like the next month or 2, as we're still figuring out how on earth are we going to do this code-wise. And, we might occasionally need some test database and stuff, but you don't need 3 people dedicated, 5 days a week, just kind of sitting around doing nothing. And when it comes to backend, I think we're at a point where we already have quite a few people. I think, was it 5 or 6 in total? Adding more, I think at this point will actually make us less productive. Because I found, for example, like when I look at the sharding issues to do, it's actually difficult for me to pick out where to start. Because the easier things like the load balancer and that sort of thing, people already looking into that. And a lot of that work overlaps. So you might have, say, 3 issues, but they're all kind of related. And so if, say, Thong does 2 of them and I come in and do the third, there might be this sort of synchronization issues where I go off doing things one way and he's like, oh, that actually collides with what I'm doing. And so theoretically, if we had all the work planned out, you could do all of that individually in parallel, then yes, adding more people would help. But we're not at that point. I think we're at a point where the opposite happens. We add more people, we become less productive as there's more synchronization needed, more meetings, more time zone issues. Basically, I think in theory, even 5 is probably stretching it. Like, assuming, again, we knew what had to be done, I'm willing to bet 3 staff engineers will be enough, basically.
Yeah. And I think one thing here that I like, this is my personal belief, so I may be wrong. It's like, I don't think we are at the point where we could sit down and make a 6-month delivery plan with all of the individual tasks, because I think there is just a lot that is still unknown, where people are figuring out how to do it. And so I think this is the other thing where, like, I don't think this parallelizes as easily because it's such a complex thing to deliver in the first place.
Okay. Yeah.
I think we can like accommodate more people, but not at this moment. Like in 1 month or 2 months from now, I think we have to like a lot of, let's say, low-hanging fruits that could be done by others. And like it's, I think would also apply for SREs and also for the backend engineers. Right now, we just have so many fundamental things that we need to like figure out how they're gonna fit, that like we simply have too many meetings about all of these fundamental things and like too little focus on actually doing that. So adding more people will create even more meetings and even less focus. So my perception of Chan is like, I think your plan is great, but not next week. Like, let's say like in 1 month or 1.5 months from now, when actually have like all of these fundamental pieces in place, and we actually have low-hanging fruits to solve, where we can focus on like on the main like goal, which is like moving all the tables, but they're gonna be like, let's say, fixing some features, creating some follow-ups, things that basically I think would be to some extent like pretty isolated and pretty well defined, because like for us like to use these extra people, we need to have things that are certain, isolated, and well defined. Because like the primary goal that I see there is like we want to ensure that it doesn't eat like a lot of our focus on like keeping extra team members occupied. And right now we are still in this phase that like we still are figuring out these fundamental things. So that's, I think, my perception that like right now, like we will just simply slow down by adding more people. It will not make it faster. We can make it faster like when we have these fundamental pieces in place, which is like we migrated the first table. We have some general understanding about how to perform migration. We know like general pieces needed for like infrastructure steps. We actually have some infrastructure for many databases, some initial support for the load balancing. We actually, at the moment that we are start dissecting the POC for the CI, once we start dissecting POC for the CI, there are gonna be like a lot of low-hanging fruits that could be picked by other people. But now I think we are not yet at this point. We're gonna be in a few weeks from now, but not yet.
Okay. What I'm hearing is, oh, Ernest, you have something to say?
Yeah, I would like to add that if we need someone today, I think that we need one SRE, somebody that knows about infrastructure. We may not need backend engineers, but we may need someone to help us on the migration part. So, for example, in order to perform the upgrade of Postgres 11 to Postgres 12, a big part of the SRE team was working on how to do that, and they had a plan on how to do logical replication and move the tables and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. In the end, they did not have enough time to test everything and do what we want to do. So what we want to do is very similar to their plan. And even though they were working on that plan for more than a month, at the end, Jerry decided to pull the plug and not do it that way. From my perspective, I think that it will be great if we had more confidence on that migration working. And also, even though we know about databases, and it's Yorick here and Adam, and we know our stuff on a higher level, there are a lot of details on the low level, like for example, the Patroni suites and other things that SREs know better than us. And maybe having somebody embedded from the get-go will help us also define what we are going to do and go towards the correct path. So for example, Dylan and Adam already work on how to do the migration. We have some ideas. Adam is also preparing some tests, but maybe it would be great to have somebody there that knows and help us think about the process so that we can speed up and not go down the wrong rabbit hole. I don't know if others agree on that, because yeah.
Yes, like we need a SRE to help us with all this infrastructure stuff, to figure out all the dependencies, steps, work exactly what is feasible, what is not feasible, as for the migration. And I think this was our primary ask for the last few days, and I think it's to some extent got fulfilled by stable counterpart. But then the question is how much capacity actually this person has to help us? Is it full time, or is it in the free time? Because if it's in the free time, then it's maybe simply not enough.
So, okay, I'm hearing, what I'm hearing is adding all 5 people now will not help too much, will not help a lot, maybe a drag even. So I think maybe we can optimize that plan. And also I heard there is something that migration on the SRE part can be worked on right now. So maybe I'm thinking proposing a plan to add one SRE now to work on the known things that we already know, and then the 2 SRE and the 2 BEs later, like in August. What I'm thinking here is also to address Marin's question. I'm going to reply the thread. I shared the Slack thread there, discussion there in our doc here. So basically, I think we need to change the mentality that Sharding group will articulate everything for every group. Then they start work on. That's not going to work. That's not going to scale. The thing is, Sharding group identifies what we need to work on, describe the scenario as best as we can. Then those responsible or those stakeholders or the experts will figure out exactly what needs to happen. I think that's the right mode. That's why I'm asking for dedicated SRE to discover and explore together with us to find the solutions we need, to find the things we need to build, and to find the things we need to run or try test. So that's my mentality, where I came from. That's why I'm asking for dedicated SRE instead of this Sharding group to plot out everything in detail, what needs to be done. So I think what Marian is asking is, tell me what we need to do, we'll do it. That's exactly what Dylan was concerned in that Slack thread. We know this needs to be done. You are the expert of this subject domain. you discover and explore what needs to be done here. Otherwise, the Sharding group is a bottleneck for everybody. And also, we don't have a lot of expertise in production environment. We don't have access to the production environment. And we probably don't have knowledge in some other product feature domains. So that's where it came from. So I think we need dedicated SRE, but we can stage it, like asking for one now and two more later, or even more later. But I need your opinion here to say that when we need extra SREs, but it feels like we need one now because we know there are something to do already.
Do we have specifics on what we are asking the early SRE involvement to be? And to answer Camille's question, right now it's part-time Jose, right? Because he's the one DBRE until there's another one's going to start in a month or two. But Jose is not dedicated. I have an outstanding question to Steve Lloyd about, can we use Nick's time? Because there is an expanded contract with Nick's time, but Steve has other considerations on a completely understaffed SRE department that will be discussed later on today. That's the opportunity cost thread that was brought up. But back to the first question, are there specific things that we can list out that we could have SRE working on right now? And I know there's the environment that we need set up so that we can actually start testing the migrations and testing replication, but are there other items that we can list out and say, yep, we need SRE focus, and here are the things that we would like them to focus on and work with us on? That will help that conversation.
I have this epic with some issues created. They are more like a blueprints to fill by SRE, like how you want to do it. And these are issues. This is epic that I link on the chat. And these are except like migration stuff, which is like, these are like, I think like general outlines, like we need to create database cluster. We need to configure that somehow. Then I guess like the next steps, we need to migrate, we need to monitor that, we need to figure out what is the procedure of like deploying all of that to the production. So I think like these are really like the issues to answer, like how it would be done. Like someone would have to go and like create some kind of outline of the dependency steps to do it, start doing that maybe on the, let's say on the side. Because like creating a database cluster is needed for then testing migration stuff, right? So this would be like the next step to do, or like concurrent stuff. But
stepping on each other. So Chun, this is the epic that Camille was referencing.
Yeah. And there is also
and we have also this migration plan for moving CI tables on GitLab.com, which is like, I think one epic is like figuring out like how to deploy this infrastructure aspect. The second one is like how we can execute migration plan, because we're gonna have to execute it on some infrastructure on GitLab.com. So SRE help will be like to help with this infrastructure rollout, provisioning new nodes, and figuring out how we can actually build like this migration plan, test that, try it many times using that infrastructure. This would be, I think, my primary goals for the SRE. And like this initial SRE would be really like on figuring out, I guess, dependencies, roughly steps, figuring out maybe some like how many SREs we would need then, like to help out with these initiatives, because there will be more work related, because we will be at some point have to do it on staging, then kind of start working on the production. We have to like migrate it on staging as well, following our migration plan. But we need to also build a migration plan, and this has to be worked with the SRE. And then it's also like aspect of like the timelines, scheduling windows for these migrations, and all of this like how you can actually run it on GitLab.com, which is like the later step. But I think all of that we figure out needs to be like executed probably a few times on staging. So this would be really like for work for the SRE later, after we figure out these steps, dependencies, people, machines, technologies, configurations, runbooks, monitoring, graphing, alerting, spreading the knowledge about the new added databases, cloning, migrating data, measuring the impact, validating, all of that things that are really like infrastructure related.
Yeah. So there are definitely a lot of things to explore and discover. I believe we have a lot of topics we can just describe, and SRE can help you leverage their expertise to discover that, articulate all the works necessary along together with us. We need to closely collaborate, because those tasks may have dependencies on what the development team can deliver. So we need to collaborate very closely, not throw the things over the wall, but we do need SRE, dedicated SRE. And we know there are already things we need to work on right now. So why not pulling them in? But
yeah, I need to drop in. Sorry.
Yeah, of course, we can you develop a schedule to pull in one SRE now and maybe two SREs later, or even more SREs later. But I need this team's feedback when we need how to develop this schedule.
Yeah, I need to drop soon, but I think one thing that would be important for me to convey as well is that I think it is my understanding that the team as it is works on delivering the CI decomposition as fast as possible, right? It's that's their main priority right now. And so the plans that we have presented, I think, take into account the fact that, we do this. So I think there may be needs articulated by the team, like this SRE, right, which are really great to help accelerate that. But I think like the mindset that I think would be super helpful would be one of saying, okay, how can we make sure that we don't get blocked, right? Because maybe we don't actually have SREs at the right point in time or enough support. But I think what is not going to accelerate it is to try and reduce the delivery time by 50%, right? By adding like more complexity and more things on top of it. I think that will not necessarily help. So I think it's more of a question. It's like, are there things that are needed right now or maybe in the near future to make sure that we can deliver on it, not the other way around of saying, please deliver it in 50% of the time, because I don't think that will necessarily lead to an acceleration, because I think we are already working at it at pace. And I think that is, and I trust the team with their expertise to make those decisions in a way that makes sense, and to articulate when there is a blocker, like with this one SRE where people say like, hey, we need someone. I think this is important, because I think everybody is aware that we want to increase the database headroom. So that's sort of my perspective on that.
I think I'm in the same line with you. So we need some SRE now, not all of them. We don't want SREs free spinning, or what they are working on has a heavy dependency on what we have not delivered yet. So we don't want them to be free spinning. Yeah, I'm in line with you. So we need to carefully develop the plan when we need how many SRE. And I can factor that in the plan to present to the leaders, say, this is a schedule, we want the SRE to get involved. So also the infrastructure team will be preparing for that. So does that make sense that we ask one dedicated SRE in July? I mean, basically right now, then adding 2 more SREs in August, or we want 1 more in August and 1 more in September?
If I understood the team correctly, 1 SRE now with support makes sense. I'm not sure we know exactly the time when we would need more support, because I think that depends a little bit on the development. But I foresee this having to happen, in the next couple of months or so, maybe a little bit after, given the timeline of trying to get this into production by the end of the year or the end of Q4.
Can can we maybe like approach that like with like some kind of wiggle room? Like we know that we need one SRE right now for sure. We know that it's very likely that we need another SRE in August, which is, let's say, for 75%. And we may need another SRE later, but we're gonna know if we need another SRE later by August, because we see like how much work is there. And like, for example, Jose will also tell us. So let's say 75% on adding another person in August, but 50% confidence that we need another person, let's say in September. And then like the closer to that date, we gonna know with more confidence if we need or don't need. But like kind of like anticipating that this is something that may be needed, and maybe this is our messaging, like that we know that this is required. There is like big chance that we're gonna need more. And this is our confidence level that we need more people later.
I like that idea, but I'm concerned about how SRE or infrastructure can plan that for us. I think this is this is a planning challenge for the SRE if we are not certain about our ask and keep it floating. So and also I also want to add that this is probably our only chance to tweak this plan now. This is just a deal. We probably won't have another opportunity to ask for a deal. So we need to carefully build this plan, make sure that we get everything we need instead of tweaking it again in 1 month or 2.
Let me. Sorry, I'm kind of doing drive-by here. Different proposal. Instead of saying we need 1, 2, 3, 4, however many SREs we need, can we just outline and say we're going to need dedicated SRE assistance for this project on this timeline? And that might be too specific. Say we need SRE to deploy our testing environment or our production environment to align with our timeline when we expect development to be done. I feel like we're getting pushback from SRE when we're saying we need one person, but we're not telling them what the work is. So maybe we shift positions and say we need to deliver X by August. Let's say we need to deliver 2 production by August. And this is what we think we need from SRE, and then let them contribute to the plan rather than us telling them how many people we need. So maybe they can throw their whole team at it for small periods of time, and it's less about picking people. It's more about how do they deliver a plan. Does that make sense?
Yes and no. Yes is yeah. Oh, this aligns up with Marin's ask. What do you want us to do? But the no is we are the bottleneck to articulate everything we want them to do. I still prefer the way that they join us, collaborate, discover, and explore together.
I think the problem with that approach is based on where we are currently. If we start with one SRE, probably for the next month, they're not going to be doing a whole lot. Like, yes, they can try and help figure out, what to do, but that's not going to be a 5-day, that's not going to be an amount of work equaling 5 work days a week. And of course, they probably still have some other things to do, but if they're going to do other things, it's no different than saying, hey, take this into account into your whole team's planning. And then it doesn't really matter who or how many people do it. I will say there, at least historically, if you tell a team like, hey, this needs to be done with some point in time in the future, my experience has been that it generally gets pushed towards the end of whatever deadline you give. And then it's like, oh, we need an extra this many weeks, months, whatever. So there is this sort of balance that's difficult to find. I would say, like, at this stage, it is very difficult to give sort of an estimate of, how much work these people will be doing. And if we even need them in the next, let's say, 2 to 4 weeks, other than maybe get some feedback, some basic stuff. I would say after a month we probably know more, and so that's where I think what might be a better approach is, instead of reserving a person now, we sort of have them on standby in some way, where we say, hey, for the next month, continue doing whatever you're doing. Just expect to be pulled into once, every now and then. And then after that, we have to see, okay, now that we've discovered more, we know more, maybe we've built some things. Now we can really see, okay, do we actually, need this person full time? Do we maybe need more or less, etc. I think in the current state, it's just too early to just say how much and who we need.
Okay, I hear we feel we probably don't have very clear tasks for them to do in the next month. I'll think about it, but I think if keeping this plan kind of uncertain is not going to work for SRE or for infrastructure. Speaking of the plan, I mean, we just get one chance to ask for what we need. So I will find a way to. I will think about the plan. What do we ask at this point? I don't think this flexible plan will work out with the executives and also for our team.
I think the challenge though is that given where we're at, if and the problem set up where this is a critical project for the company, we all know that, and if we only get one chance to ask for what we need, we're just going to over rotate on what we need. That's the only possible answer, right? Like, like if you're saying, what do you need? This has to be delivered as soon as possible. Just because, already very, very quicker than we thought originally. Tell me what you need now, and you can't go back and ask for more. Then you're gonna like, the only rational answer is to ask for more than what you need, right? Is that?
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, I don't know if my statement was true or not, but I have a feeling that we'll have less and less opportunity to tweak the plan.
But that, yeah, okay.
Yeah, if our credibility is at the stake.
Yeah,
I
guess
I don't know.
I'm not sure. That feels challenging assertion though, right? Where we have a lot of our exploration to do. I think the team saying we don't really have we don't have everything figured out yet, right? And so therefore there's a certain number of unknowns, and so the only potential answer is to, with that problem definition, is to just ask for everything that you might possibly need.
Yeah, I can do this. I can show one fixed plan, but also ask how much flexibility we have in the future to ask more so that we can optimize the plan. But we prepare a worst case plan that even some people will be free spinning or have no clear direction what to do. They need to discover themselves. So we want them to be with us. That's the worst case scenario, but I can ask for how much flexibility we have in the future. Then we can optimize this for everybody.
Yeah, I think that might, like, that, or saying, look, we think we might need this. We'll give you the soonest and the most number of people we think we'll need. We don't know for sure whether we're going to need that. But if we plan for that and we don't end up needing it, then it's okay, right? Like, we just have more capacity. But as far as capacity planning for downstream teams, SRE and others, it might be helpful to know what we think like the high watermark would be. And then we can plan for the worst case scenario as far as staffing goes, right? and just communicate that we can call these people in when we need them.
Yeah.
And that not to expect any kind of pushback or further delays,
Yeah.
but not necessarily have them like onto the team already cleared their schedules. Anyway, we can take this offline as far as how to best.
Sounds good. Okay, I think we discussed a lot about this. More people. Any more points or thoughts to share here before we move on to next bullet?
One quick on the top, just the bullet from what Fabian was saying. I get the desire to just accelerate this for 10x, but do you think how much effort do you think is worth spending on communicating the overall headroom we think we'll have based on the PK migrations and all the work being done on the table size for a CI build stable, which seems like the top two items. So one's under control, the other one we have a number like 10 things going on to help address it. Do you think that would be helpful to present as well, to make sure we're all aligned as far as like the overall headroom we think we'll get, or should we just stay focused on?
My impression is
the
no.
goal of,
It's
okay.
supporting information to buy us more headroom, but they're really looking for us to deliver this solution. This is the one big bang, right, to get us the multiplier in headroom. So while that's nice and supportive data, the concerns expressed by the executive branch on this one is that they want to see this delivered. They want to see us deliver it as fast as they can, as fast as we can. And we just need to communicate it in a way with confidence that makes them happy. And I'm still struggling with that, as we all are on this. So yeah, sorry, to answer your question. I don't want to go off on a tangent.
Can we somehow like, let's say, maybe it's like still like planning, but maybe like going away from the quarters to, let's say, milestones, like see like how many people we could use like in the given milestones, like understanding like what would be our like the primary focus in the given milestones, because like we effectively have like around 6 milestones we like to figure out. So maybe if we could like go milestone by milestone, defining like the key result that we are looking in the given milestone, and seeing like people that we need, like different people, let's say the quantity of the people that we would need from the backend and SRE, because like the fact is like that the proportion of like our needs gonna be shifting on the milestones. The closer we are to deploying to the production, we will be more dependent on the infrastructure side. We're gonna be less really requiring backend engineering because we're gonna be kind of concluding development. So maybe kind of approaching that from that angle.
I like that idea. We can develop that, but depends on how much flexibility we can, timing is a problem right now. Today, we need this plan to be presented. So I need to assemble this plan today. I don't think we have enough time to develop that plan in what you described. But if we do, if I do get the flexibility from the executives, then we can work on that later. And I say maybe a month later, we'll have a much clearer picture when we need what people and how many. But today, we just need a plan to, I don't know if we have enough time to develop that today.
Okay, so I started writing this table on the bottom because these are, I think, the milestones that we are looking.
Where did you start writing, Camille?
I started writing this table at the bottom.
Oh, I see. Sorry, I was looking at the team agenda, not the charting plan. Got it.
Sharding project plan.
Yep.
Doc.
Thank you.
Development PR, infrastructure PR. basically, like right now for the 14.1, we are looking at adding CI instance variables for development and now we actually like right now we are I think with 4 people working on that, but it's like our second focus. What else we have right now planned?
Does that include GDK, GCK work?
Yeah, in the mark PDBs, in the main DB support.
Okay.
So yes, the main things there is support for multi-PDBs and load balancing, and the application changes required for at least supporting one table.
Okay, right now we are also developing merge request, right? This is actually, I think, our focus right now. Investigating. Actually, this is more like on the infrastructure side because it's actually like Dylan is looking at it from the infrastructure side. Okay, so I figured this is this current milestone. Next milestone, we're actually gonna be continuing dissecting. I think this is the moment that we start dissecting CI, POC, moving some tables. This is like the moment for that. Adding support for MongoDB Omnibus CMG. And finding EPC pattern. This is probably the moment we start looking at that. This is probably still like 4. For the infra, I think at this moment we should start probably joining DB cluster for staging, configure CIDB for staging using CMG, and start testing the streaming application. This is probably like the moment that we start looking at that. And then like, is it really like 1 or 2 people at that moment? Defining 14.3, I think this is the work we work on disconnecting joins. CI, which is like the features affected. Start initial.
I think that it's difficult to plan ahead more than 2-3 milestones. So with all respect for trying to plan ahead 6 milestones, there are too many unknowns. And I know that Camille knows the next steps that we need to take, and we more or less know what we want to do. But there are so many unknowns there and so many dependencies. And this a little bit, at least this is my perspective, breaks a little bit the MVC approach and the way that we approach things and iterate. So maybe I don't know if we can. So, Camille, you think that we can set a full plan for 6 milestones?
It's not very detailed. I think this is maybe like the headlines that I kind of feel that they are still like very optimistic, because like anything that will like make us, let's say, shift because of various reasons, we like make this move. But these are the things that I'm known that we need to do at some point. These are the things that it's part of our ethics. So it's not detailed because like we cannot really like start working on them, but I think these are the things that we know that we need to do at some point. I'm actually have like, I think for me, like development part, like I have pretty good perspective. I have very little like understanding of all the infrastructure dependencies that we will need to solve after basically on like starting from the 14.3, which is like how we kind of build confidence in this like migration scheme, how we validate that, how we test that, how we test like the resiliency of this process. So there is like a lot of unknowns in that part on the infrastructure side. And this is why we need SRE, because they have their way of working on this stuff. They have their procedures, documentation, runbooks that they need to update. So maybe continue testing replication, test failovers, recovery, I don't know, update runbooks.
So looking at the table, would it help perhaps for our planning if we move things like GDK and such to like the very end? Because I'm thinking that, excuse me, that until we've sort of actually made the split, so to speak, I think the only people who would be interested in this separate database setup would be the people in the sharding group. People outside of that wouldn't really be affected by it until we say, hey, you know, these tables are now going to live in this separate database. No, I don't know how much work it necessarily will be. I think GDK would probably be fairly straightforward, but I would imagine Omnibus, CNG, and source installations will be more difficult. So I'm wondering if perhaps if you just push that to, let's say 14.3, what we can then maybe do is, let's say the item CI joining, for example, we can move that earlier. Because I think if we're looking at the sort of pressure to come up with basically a sort of waterfall style plan, like, hey, by this point in time, we are here, versus the amount of unknowns, I think it might be more beneficial if we start with kind of the sort of inverse. We say, hey, all the actual shipping stuff, like configuration and GDK, etc., we do that last. We're just going to do the technical things and figure out, okay, can we do this, how, who, etc. Because otherwise what we might find is we extend GDK, Omnibus, etc., and 2 months later we find out, oh shoot, we need to do this completely different thing.
There is one risk associated with that. The later we do it, there may be new features added that will not adhere to what we are adding. So the sooner we kind of add some kind of face-safe checks like about the joins and stuff, it may be slightly inconvenience, but we're actually guarding these like our work to ensure that this is like not a moving target. That's I think this is really like my perception why we should try to embrace like GDK early and like try to, let's say, I mean, like still we move tables, it's still not gonna affect anyone. Still we move like I don't know, class models and things like that. Still we don't configure like this database. maybe it's like we just toggle a switch at some point with just configuring database for the development. But I think like the second aspect is this all disable joins and like things that we know that simply will not work. We need to somehow start embracing that early to kind of, let's say, document that and start adding places in the code that we know that it's not working, that it will not work. So I don't know, Yorick. Your point is very correct. I think like
put it this way, my point is
flexible to
more.
figure out.
So I'm basically, I think what I would propose is as a starting point, like we've already sort of decided, hey, CI is going to be the thing we focus on. I think a starting point there, perhaps a controversial one, is that we say, from this point forward, you cannot add new columns, indexes, foreign keys, whatever, to the CI tables. In other words, the schema can't change. Because otherwise, what's going to happen is we're going to start looking into all of this. And as we do that, people are going to change everything and add more work, etc. And if we do that somehow, I think we can essentially save ourselves the work of GTK Omnibus, etc. Because we've already told this is frozen. You can't change it.
I'm not sure if it's acceptable to freeze like the schema. It means like you block adding new features for kind of undefined amount of time. So
right, but this is why I mentioned it might be a more controversial decision. We are running a bit out of time, but given the pressure from upstairs, basically, and given the complexity, I personally would say this warrants a freeze where you say, CI, we are, because we're looking into it, because we're going to move it around, and we can't do that when it's changing, we're not going to allow changing it. We probably can't do that today. So we need a slightly more clear estimate for, hey, this is when we start, this is when we, roughly expect to be done.
I'm kind of thinking that problem is not like freezing schema. The problem is like figuring out how we move the tables, because as soon as you move table, you need to ensure the consistency between tables. And like, I think in general, it can be pretty tricky, like to move all tables at once. So we need probably to do it like in like a few at a time. And then like figuring out that like, this was the question from Andreas on the CI decomposition, CMN MR, many databases, like how we ensure like the schema consistency between these two databases, because this is like becoming a major problem that we need people like to adhere like to these like guidelines somehow automatically. So
if we need to freeze the schema, we can give the CI team a heads up. I think 1 month should work. One release ahead should work. All the CI team is working on now is basically paying off tech debt. The infra dev issues, all those performance tweaks and scalability tweaks. So I doubt they're adding new features. So then they probably won't need to make more schema changes or adding new table. They are adding a new table because of the CI queuing. But if we give them a 1 month notice, they just get all the changes necessary in that 1 month, then we can freeze it.
Okay, then I think to sort of wrap up, because we are running a bit over time, I think, and please correct me if I'm wrong, the general consensus at this point is right now we don't need the extra SREs, backend developers, etc., as we're still trying to figure out sort of how to do all this. I do think we all agree that having at least one SRE be available in some capacity in the, let's say, the next month or two is beneficial. For that, we have to figure out, okay, what would this person actually be doing? There, we should also probably look at, how much is that going to be? Because if it's only a couple of days, we probably don't need a dedicated person for an entire quarter. Yeah, and then the last thing is probably this. We need to provide a plan upstairs, basically, and I think that's where the opinions are still a little divided. Maybe it helps if, for example, I, Camille, and some of the others perhaps continue afterwards, so that we don't have to keep everybody in here, and try and sort of develop a better understanding of, let's say, what we can do at least in the coming month. That isn't the load balancer and the real 6 sharding stuff, because that's already ongoing. And I think there, if we can at least give something for the next month, I think we can probably take a lot of the pressure off, because then people at least know, oh, hey, this is what we sort of expect, instead of it just being this black box. But yeah, please correct me if I'm wrong.
I like Camille's table. I think it helps support some of the requests, and it'll allow SRE to give some feedback too of, okay, I see what you're asking for, and it's not necessarily 2 or 3 people 100% of the time, so they can't do anything else, and they can work it in with the other things that they're doing. So while it may not be 100% accurate, I think it gives a good big picture and milestones for us to work towards, where we can kind of say, okay, this is on track, this is falling behind, and we can tweak it as we need it. So I really like this plan.
I like this. And Camille, quick question for this these 2 cells, 4 to 6. So that means we need extra BEs temporarily. And for all the cells that have 4, that means basically the sharding group is sufficient.
Yes, this is my perception, that like we can use more capacity at this moment, but it's more like the temporary thing, and like how much people, it's really like I think we're gonna figure out that. But like once we move the CI tables, we don't need really these people anymore. We don't really have to help like roll out that changes, fix small problems. Like these extra people, it's effectively like on the features that we see gonna be broken and that we need to roll out and things like that, to fix them, whatever. So like things that are usually pretty isolated.
Okay, so those extra people should come from the features that's broken. Ideally,
I'm not. It usually helps, but I don't think that this is really like a strong requirement on that, because like the features that, okay, there are maybe some features that will have to be fixed from the respective teams, but probably half of them are pretty generic things to solve. That if someone understands like how to deal with database and how to write base code, it's gonna be fine with fixing them.
Okay.
So, I think my only concern, I saw security feature being affected, so we may need someone from the security team specifically. As for the CI, I'm not sure this is strongly needed. I think they have enough like things that to work on concurrently, that we could basically use someone different who can write DB and write stuff.
Okay, thank you. Also, I just want to remind everybody before we go. So I also added one item like if we find out the work that can be found out to feature teams, we want commitment from those teams to take on and execute and work on that according to upon our request. So that's another way to get extra BE bandwidth for us. So I will keep that. That's the ask I want to raise. So when necessary, when we need, we will articulate the work and fan out the work to the feature team because their feature is broken. Or, like a distribution database team, they need to do their piece. So we will fan out and this team will not work on those things.
That's very good thing. Like, so let me fix that. 6. Additional help can be from distribution for omnibus PNG. This is where we could use help from like very well defined people, because it will be very well defined thing to solve. So we could focus on the not omnibus, because this could be handled by the team, but we would focus on the main story. So for the 14.2, this could be useful.
In general, this is how we work also on the database group. So we build the tools, we set up the way to work, and then its feature team is responsible and helps us on their feature because they also know better their feature. The fact that we know we have Camille here and we know a lot about CI does not mean that we will know everything about all tables that we're going to work on. So I agree.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, everyone. We are over time. We're over time, but thank you very much for your help to get this plan to this. I'll clean up. This is a very good information, helps me to form our proposal. And I will also ask for how much flexibility we have to tweak it further. I want to try as best as I can to reserve that capability. Thank you very much, everyone. Yeah.
Thank you.